2, 1. Fragments of silicon. Our schedule makes sense if you look at it in 4 dimensions.
Yeah. I'm sure that makes sense on some level there, Galax.
I was referring to the fact that we had a canceled episode yesterday, but it's not a
Yeah.
big deal.
Well, uh, blame that
Sorry,
on.
I know, and part of it is I'm tired, so
Yes. Anyway,
I knew I wasn't going to have a winner.
Yes. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Joining me as always is the regular crew, minus Mac. Speaking of people who are not doing so good, he's. I'm not sure if he's sick or he's just ragged from work or whatever. He's just not joining us this week.
He is the death.
Yeah, that's the way he put it. Anyway, I'm your host Adam, and joining me as always are Ogre,
Harump,
Daleks,
Hi.
Petty Fan,
I exist.
and Twilight.
Yo.
All right, let's get to the news. Twilight, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, we've been having a lot of rainstorms for the past few days, especially last night. It was a bad one. Thankfully, the power didn't get knocked out. As for more notable things, well, after missing a game last week, we finally got to play another tabletop game, session yesterday or last night. And probably the best one we've had in a while. And been playing the RPG that we'll be reviewing this Sunday, and that's about it.
All right, Petty Fan, you're up.
Well, the biggest thing is Monday I saw the doctor about my knee, and they finally decided to give me a shot of pain medication in it.
Cortisone?
I don't remember what it was, but it's helped for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not as much relief as it probably could be, but apparently it's not a joint issue like I was thinking. I'm having a problem with the muscles. So that's fun.
Yeah, that might be better.
Yeah.
Considering it's not a joint. But I guess wait for the professional opinions.
Let's see. My sister today just got a smartwatch I had to help her set up. A Samsung Gear Fit 2 Pro. So that's something I might think about getting myself a smartwatch, just because the past few times I've been at the doctor's office, my heart rate's been high. And I don't know if it's, anxiety at being at the doctor's office or if there's an actual problem. So getting one of those might not be a horrible idea.
You suffer from high anxiety?
A lot of times, yeah, if I deal with a lot of people or whatever. So
are we talking actual disorder levels or what?
It depends on the environment. If you were to put me into Walmart or somewhere with a big crowd, I would be looking for the first chance to leave immediately. I don't like crowds of people.
I can relate.
Like, yeah, my parents have the hardest time trying to get me to go to parties with them. It's like, yeah, nope, nope, nope. And let's see. Nothing else really big. I've been trying to work on Ni no Kuni 2 because it's actually a pretty alright game, except for some issues we'll go into Sunday.
I'm like,
What, Adam?
okay. Right. So, Galix, you're up.
Well, this is being a interesting and so far pretty unpleasant week. I had to. It's been raining a lot, and sometimes not enough snow to stick on the ground or anything, but enough to like be noticeable on windshields, which is frustrating when you're driving. Yesterday I had my car maintenanced, and thankfully nothing really went wrong with it, but it was one of the really thorough ones, so it was really expensive, so that's not fun. Um, this Friday there's a thing for work that I have to do that I have to be there at like 8 or 8:30, which is about to an hour and a half before I wake up, so that's fun. Um, and my normal Sunday Pathfinder game is on Saturday this week, which messes up my normal Saturday plans. And there's also a Splatfest this weekend, and I don't know what team I'm on. So, a lot of stuff going on. I'm installing Ni no Kuni 2. I have not yet installed it. Um, I hope to at least have time to try to boot it up, but considering that the specs for its minimum are like 2 generations ahead of what my computer actually has, I'm not confident that I'll be able to actually play any significant amount of it. But I'll try.
You tried.
Uh-huh. And I'm really tired now because not last night, but 2 nights ago, for pretty much no real reason, I did not get to sleep until like 6 a.m.
Damn.
And then I woke up at 10, so 4 hours of sleep is not a fun amount of sleep to have.
I'm like, especially, I'm like, I used to be able to do that. Like, that was my college years.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the 3-hour special. I defined many a night.
So I no matter how early I go to sleep, I'm not going to get much sleep Thursday night if I need to be up to get to the thing on Friday. So not the most fun week I've had. But on the other hand, I don't actually feel like death, so I guess it all requires a little bit of perspective.
Indeed. Like, and I guess it's Ogre's turn now.
Well, let's see. Yesterday we had a tornado warning. Because we actually had a tornado in the area. I think it wasn't around us, but it was formed later on. So we weren't in any real danger, but tornado nonetheless.
'Tis the season to get twisted. La 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 la.
Damn you, Twinrova. Or Twinova. Whichever the ones from Ocarina of Time, whichever the ones from Final Fantasy XIV.
Wait, what?
I think I mixed them up, but whatever. That's
Twinrova is from Ocarina of Time.
It's not important right now. The internet can wait for later. So, yeah, we had a tornado warning in the area, and then today it decided to snow a little bit. Not much, just flurries, and I'm starting to think there's something broken in the weathering program.
Welcome to Midwestern winter, friend.
And I've lived here for all my life. I'm not really used to this stuff. Also, it's spring now, so...
We're gonna have snow Friday. I'm not looking forward to it.
We're gonna have snow this weekend for some reason.
What hell is this?
Anyway, I beat Dragon Quest Builders the other day. Man, did that last boss make me work for it.
So is that a game that, like, I guess it has a final boss and an ending, but is it also just like a game where you just keep playing?
I mean, you have a final boss, and it has an ending, but it has a just go here and do all the kind of shit you want place. So
It basically has a Minecraft
I guess
mode.
yeah. What I'm getting at is that, like, in Minecraft, sure, theoretically, your end goal, I guess, is to defeat the Ender Dragon, but also you could, like, build a computer.
it's a separate mode for that. It's like there's 4 different chapters you have to go through, but you have just a Minecraft area where you can just go around and go, I made a dick, all you want. So honestly, it's well worth an investment for me because it's Dragon Quest, and I want Dragon Quest to succeed here. Don't try it, Monkey Paw. And luckily, after that, Dragon Quest Builders 2 news got announced, and looks like they're kind of bringing up the whole Dragon Quest 2 storyline a bit, which should be kind of fun, all things considered. It's kind of confusing because the original game and the second game took place like 100 years after the first game, and this one implies that there's been several hundreds of years between generations, but I don't know. They'll make it work somehow.
Fuck, it's Dragon Quest, right?
No, they're usually pretty good about kind of keeping things similar. Granted, this is probably like a whole future Trunks Majin Buu thing where it's like, it doesn't matter, he's still going to come back some way. So, whether it's years from now or not, doesn't matter. Let's see. Recordings are going fine. Not much to say about that. It's Kirby. What do you want me to say? So,
how fun it is.
Well, it's fun. But, I mean, other than that, it's been kind of fun to deal with. But, yeah, that's kind of about it for me.
All right. I guess it's my go. Let's see. Well, first of all, if you missed it, yeah, we've been having some scheduling problems, mainly due to the fact that it's the seasons for illness. Not just the changing of seasons, but it's also con season. So yeah, we've had some people get sick at GDC, and they couldn't make their initial date, so things got pushed back because there's not much point in having sick people show up.
Indeed. I'm gonna need to remember to contact my person at Memorial Park and make sure they're not dying from frickin' PAX plague.
Yeah, it's
after that.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried about next week because our guest next week is at PAX, and well, once again, con plague.
Yeah. PAX Pox is the worst.
It's not a joke. It's like these things kind of ravage our plants, among other things.
Mm-hmm. Like PAX and GDC are some of the biggest events for indie devs. So there's a lot of people, so it's basically a petri dish of hell.
Yeah, it's like it also makes hell for communications.
Oh, yes.
Like right now I'm trying to close a package deal for May, and it's getting delayed because, well, people are at PAX. So, fun times. Like, if I haven't made it clear, I really, really fucking hate these conventions on a personal level.
And yet, if they didn't have the conventions, then we probably wouldn't have anyone to talk to.
I couldn't measure a guess in that direction.
Well, I just mean they're important for developers to get their products out.
I'm like, that's PAX. GDC is kind of something different. Like, but we don't have time to get into the particulars of that. Outside of that, yeah, not much happening this week. It's like, especially since it's like our plans keep getting delayed. But Ni no Kuni is taking up a lot of time because it is a big JRPG. It's like I cannot promise that anyone will be even finishing it because once again it's a JRPG. But I think we've made at least significant, like really getting up to chapter 4 seems to be the key event here because that's when everything kind of unlocks.
Like, I also will say that's probably going to be my post-stream game, at least for a while, so there'll be that.
Yeah, understandable. I'm not sure if I'm going to, well, it's like, I mean, it's like if I'm going to be able to return to Ni no Kuni 2 after this week because, we kind of operate on a conveyor belt here. Like, once the game's reviewed, it's on to the next game. So it goes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm dealing with pretty idyllic weather.
Damn Floridian bastard.
I'm enjoying it before the heat.
Well, fair enough, yeah.
Humidity. Trust me. Come summertime.
Yeah, Florida has hell weather too. It's just a different time of year.
Yeah, it's like, trust me, I'll be complaining that when come July.
Oh yeah, I know a lot about humidity. We live near the Missouri River, so it's like
Yeah. So I'm enjoying April.
April, we went to Florida for vacation like 3 times when I was in middle and high school, and April was the best time.
Yes. Well, with all that in mind, merrily we shall be rolling along to the interview portion, and we are pleased to welcome back to the program Madameberry.
Hello.
Yes. Also, a bit of a programming note: Naka isn't here this time. So if you were hoping he'd be on this broadcast, that is unfortunately not the case. Anyway.
Yeah, he figured nothing he could really talk about, so he sat this one out.
Yeah.
Also something about sleep.
Yeah. Anyway. Right. So you just released a game called Visual Out.
I did.
Right? Think we talked about last time?
Yeah, I think that was the topic of last time. Although some discussions about my other games came up too.
Yeah, it's like that was a bit more of a getting to know you discussion. This time around, it's right into the nuts and bolts, so to speak. I'm like, all right, so where to start? I'm like, I suppose we should start with what this game is for those who missed last time, or just have never heard of it before.
Visual Out is it's a Metroidvania. It's set inside of a dying computer, and it kind of you play as an escaped program, sort of defying your operating system, and you attempt to, for one, execute the program that your operating system does not want you to execute, and also kind of discover what even happened in this computer.
Giving off some Tron vibes here.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, no actual people getting put into computers, but
No saving the user.
Yeah.
Yeah. And circling in on the protagonist here, this program, I gotta admit, I've never seen an avatar designed quite like, I'm not even sure what its name is.
It doesn't really have one. I've been calling him Leggy Boy because people latched on to how long and spindly his legs are.
That's a name.
That's
so
accurate.
I've just been calling him Leggy Boy.
Was there a particular reason you went with the really long legs?
So back when I first created Visual Out during Ludum Dare, 48-hour game jam, I was taking a lot of heavy inspiration from Super Brother Sword and Sorcery, and they have that like long spindly leg kind of style, although I think they go a little step extra with theirs. because their legs are just one straight pixel all the way down. But that's kind of where that came from, and I kept it just for I went through a couple of character redesigns, but I ended up just going back to the Ludum Dare version, just for his simplicity and the kind of uncanniness that you get from him.
And what were the other designs you tried to use?
There were a couple where I put like a satellite dish like on his head, or I made his head a television. There was one where I kind of segmented his torso in a couple of different places. Like none of these designs were particularly detailed because he's a pixel character with like 6 pixels in his head. So
makes sense. Right, and so was there a particular reason you chose the Metroidvania genre as your vehicle of choice in terms of game design and gameplay and all that?
I think I kind of just wanted to make a Metroidvania. Like I kind of just wanted to make something where you get lost and have to find yourself and have to explore, and have to learn how this world even works.
Like, not an uncommon sentiment, given the popularity of the genre on the indie circuit.
Yeah. I feel like recently it's like how a couple years ago was like the year of the roguelikes. It's like the year of the Metroidvanias. Like Iconoclasts just came out.
Yeah, we talked about this a bit in the review we did on Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had a chance to watch that yet.
I have.
Right. And yeah, we're kind of concerned about visual out here because, yeah, the indie Metroidvania genre, has been saturated for a while now, but yeah, just.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much every genre is going to take its turn being hyper saturated. And I think, I don't know, it's hard because you can say like, oh, well, maybe it's not the right time for this, maybe it's not the right time for that, but like, when is? Like, there's so many games coming out. When is the right time to make any particular game?
Well, especially since, correct me if I'm wrong here, this took about 3 years to develop.
Yeah.
It's like, development time that long, you really don't have any sort of U-turns or left turns.
What do you mean?
That isn't, if it happens that Metroidvanias are oversaturated and you've been spending 3 years developing your game.
Oh yeah, there's no turning around from that.
Yeah, it's like, what you got is what you got.
Yeah, it got to a point about a year ago where I was just like, I've just invested so much into this, I just have to finish it,
Well, did you work on, like, how much of your work time was spent on Visual Out?
It was pretty much full time. I had a couple of contract art work that I did, but that didn't really take away too much time. Thankfully, because of Patreon, I could work on it full time. Otherwise, it just wouldn't have been made.
That is rare for a game dev, a Patreon account. I think the only other Patreon that I've seen from game dev is Louis Zeno.
I know of a couple of development Patreons, but it's not as successful as, say, like video production or music or anything.
Right. Like, might be due to like the more episodic nature of like YouTube videos and such.
Yeah, like if you do a Patreon for a long-term project, you have to have a damn good deliverable.
No arguments there. Well, I mean, how have your Patreon supporters taken to Visual Out?
I haven't had a lot of like direct comments on my Patreon about it, but it seems like a lot of people who have played it enjoy it.
That's good to hear. And I suppose building upon that, how has the critical reception been to your game?
I mean, in terms of actual reviewers, because I haven't had as much reach as I would like, and that's partially my fault, but for the most part, all right. It's not like stand out, it's not the most amazing thing ever, but it's all right. Like, I'm one person, I'm happy with how it came out.
And you speak about reach, I suppose the question is, how would you boost your reach? Which is honestly a question that gets asked all the time now.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't have a publisher. I feel like if I had a publisher, I would have had, more reach, more sales, etc. I'm not sure it would have been the best decision though. Because
you sacrifice a lot when you have someone else involved like that.
Yeah, you sacrifice a bit of control, but you also kind of sacrifice what they do for you, they want to recoup. So you get a publisher, and sometimes they'll take a portion of sales, or sometimes all of 100% of sales, until they recoup what they spent marketing your game.
Right.
So it's sometimes you get a publisher and then you don't actually see any money from sales. And there have been a couple of postmortems that I've read that are just incredibly sobering, where because of their publisher, they don't actually see any money post launch.
Yeah, heard that.
I kind of veered off topic, but I'm sorry.
No, this is definitely connected. Especially like I said on this program, this is topic number one these days. Because we're going through what some have dubbed the indie-pocalypse.
Yeah.
And there are more games out there than ever. We were talking about this subject with the developers of Blossom Tales last week. And, they faced a pretty harrowing situation when their game failed on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where if the Switch version hadn't saved them, they wouldn't be a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we've known studios for years that have shut down in this environment.
Yeah.
It's kind of a harsh reality, and there's a reason why publishers exist. There's a reason why marketers exist. We deal with those on a couple of levels here. We had the head of the Square Enix Collective on the program not too long ago, and he mentioned it was a rough year for them last year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is a very relevant topic to all indies.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no easy answers, because if you do if you do go in with a marketer or a publisher or whatever, yeah, there's a take to be had.
Yeah.
But
it's a really hard trade-off, and I was in a position where I didn't really have the budget to hire a marketer anyway. Patreon keeps me afloat, and it let me finish the game, and it let me hire a musician, which was fantastic, and not something that I would have been able to do if I hadn't had Patreon. But it wasn't enough to hire a marketer. Their rates are, for a good one, pretty high.
Right, and
at least compared to what I could.
Yeah, and in terms of the development of the game itself, you didn't have to take out a loan or anything to.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, because that's also a pretty common thing with indie development.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, in the terms of like sausage being made, if you've gone down that route, then having a publisher may not be the worst idea in the world, because here's the thing, your sales are going to go towards the loan.
Yeah.
Who was it, the Owl Boy guys that
Cuphead devs mortgage their house.
Cuphead, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Where
they like refinanced their house or something.
Yeah,
that one thankfully has a good ending, but that's not guaranteed.
There are
Yeah,
many
it could've
one I've
very
seen
easily
that
gone a different
it's
way.
bad and they're homeless now.
Yeah, I'm like, that almost happened to a developer we had on the program. The people who did Poncho almost had that situation. And the game Aztecs by Team Colorblind, they're not making any money off of their game for they project several years, because they took out loans and the game just didn't do that well.
Mm-hmm.
This is the picture of environment we are in at this moment of recording. So
yeah,
thankfully, it sounds like even if your game doesn't find success, if it does all right, even if it fails or whatever, there's no pain attached to that.
Yeah, it's kind of a matter of like my stakes are low enough that I really only have to make up for the fact that I was developing this game for 3 years, and that's 3 years of my life I could have been, doing anything else with.
Right.
So thankfully, like literally anything is better than 0, I guess. I mean, of course it is, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, so was there a particular reason why it took 3 years, or was it just like overall game development?
I feel like part of it was at about the 1.5 to 2 year mark, I just lost a lot of momentum to like, I don't know, it just got through a kind of a slog, but like 2 or 3/4 of the way through, and what I thought boss development would take maybe 4 months. It took like almost an entire year. And then the last year was almost entirely like QA, which I did not anticipate.
No one anticipates how long QA takes.
It's awful.
Yeah, I think it's part of the rules of quality assurance is.
And I'm still finding crap and fixing crap. Like,
I'm like, once again, that's a familiar refrain on this program.
Yeah. I found crap post-launch that I'm like, I swear to God, I fixed that 6 months ago. What happened?
Somebody submits a bug report. How the hell did you get in there?
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and I suppose the question that beckons here is, how long do you plan on, post-launch bug fixing this thing?
Probably not for more than a few more months. I mean, if like a few years down the line there's just a massive bug that needs to be fixed and it doesn't look like it's going to take that long to fix it, then like I'll probably go back and fix it, But
like if something game breaking pops up or whatever.
Yeah, like if the game crashes on the final boss and it's like, oh, I just have to like, put in a variable here or something to fix it, then like I'll like keep my eye on stuff for as long as I have to, but for really stringent support, I don't think I'm going to keep at this post-launch support for more than a few more months. I do have a couple of extra features that I'd like to add, just a couple of options, like in an options menu. Um, but I haven't planned that entirely out yet, so I'm not gonna go too deep into that.
I'm like, makes sense. Like, especially since those kind of things can introduce a whole slew of new bugs.
Yeah.
I've seen the news reports. You know, patch breaks game.
Patch breaks computer.
Yeah.
I patch it and just becomes a blue screen machine. It's a feature. You're in a dying computer. Get it?
Oh, I remember back in the days. What was that one game from Bungie that if you deleted it, it wiped your hard drive or whatever?
Oh, that was Myth
God.
2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so that was so bad that they had to recall the game, and they ended up having to sell 20% of the company to Take-Two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like there's a whole chain of events there, but that's kind of outside the purview of this interview. Yeah. Anyway, getting back to the game itself, like how old of a computer are we talking here? Are we talking like something from the 90s, a microcomputer from the 80s, a mainframe?
It's oh shoot, when was it? I think it's there's kind of an Easter egg in there. You can sort of date it between a 3-year range, I think in the 80s. I forget exactly when it is. But in one of the, I guess the first log entry, there's kind of a bit of a trivia in there that you can use to sort of like locate the date range.
And,
I won't spoil it.
yeah, and connected to that is like things like the CR, the fuzz effect. Is that supposed to be like a CRT monitor?
Yeah, it's intended to be like a super jank old CRT, but it's widescreen, so it's not totally accurate.
Maybe it's just letterboxed, like really bad, vertically.
It's letterboxed so bad that the actual there's a border that's intended to be the actual computer screen.
Yeah, that would make it a Vectrex monitor.
We're in a dying Vectrex.
Like, it's like.
It originally wasn't widescreen. I think the Ludum Dare version was 4:3, but I made it widescreen just because I felt like games are widescreen. I don't know.
Well, going further along with the whole retro vibe, did you ever at any point wanted to do the game in like 8-bit or 16-bit pixel art?
No. I had a specific style in mind from the beginning, and again, it was kind of reminiscent of that Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery, where it's like pixel art, but it's kind of higher res.
Quasi-pixel art?
Yeah. I mean, Sword and Sorcery uses a lot of gradients and other things that I don't, but I also go heavy on the effects.
Well, I think that was a good call, considering you've got on the one side Axiom Verge doing the 16-bit Metroid graphics, and you have Environmental Station Alpha doing the 8-bit stuff. Among other Metroidvania titles, it's like the indie scene is not lacking in retro design.
Yeah, I also I like using pixel art in ways that purists think you shouldn't, I guess. I think pixel art with gradients and other particle effects and everything looks really nice, and I think it can look a lot better than some people think mixing pixel art and not pixel art can look.
And in terms of, well, Metroidvania power-ups, how did you come up with, like, the jammer and the like?
So none of the power-ups were the way I originally envisioned. I kind of scrapped my original vision pretty much as soon as I started actually programming anything. But I wanted pretty much all of them to do something with movement. Instead of, your 300 gun power-ups, I guess, that a lot of Metroidvanias have. So stuff like the jammer, like it's all stuff that helps you get places was my overarching goal. And then the
Well,
jammer,
like the first thing being the tether, and then you can combine that with like usually when you're jamming something, you're jamming it because you're then going to move it somewhere.
yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, that is a design philosophy that not every Metroidvania title out there follows. Like, whether or not that's a good or a bad thing is a subjective affair.
Yeah, I think there's an idea too where, because you get genre purists as well, where some people think like, oh, it's not really a roguelike if you blah 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 blah. It's not really a Metroidvania if blah 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 blah.
You can't have a Metroidvania without morph ball technology.
Oh God! Like just last year, like the variance on roguelikes we played was kind of off the charts. It's like, well, when you have a game like Tumbleseed, which is the weirdest fucking roguelike I've ever played.
The only thing that's even roguelike about it at all is the fact that it's I don't even think it's procedurally generated exactly, but it's it has
the main levels were
thing.
Yeah. The main levels were, but like the town wasn't. It's like, or like a game we're going to be reviewing in May, City of Brass, is a roguelike first-person shooter. It's like that. That's
Video
how
games are
genres
weird.
Yeah. Well, this is how genres work. They start.
Well, yeah, and roguelike is a very complicated genre because it means like 3 different things.
Yeah.
And Metroidvanias here, like you got to differentiate yourself, to stand out. Like
how much of it is adventure platformer, how much of it is power up based progression.
Mm-hmm.
And I avoided using the word Metroidvania anywhere on like my press kit or the Steam page or anything. One, because it is more derivative than usual Metroidvanias, and 2, also it's just not great form to cite a franchise in your like marketing material.
Right.
Unless it was like you that did the original, apparently.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Metroidvania just became like the term for these things. But
yeah, like it's a genre, but it's also a franchise, and it's just really weird.
Yeah, it's 2 franchises, and ironically,
it's 2 franchises
neither one of those
had a baby.
Yeah, and neither one of those franchises is exactly a perfect example of what a Metroidvania means.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that kind of happens when you smash 2 things together, all unwieldy like that. Like it's a colloquial term that became an official genre term because what else do you call these things?
Yeah.
Like whatever name you use, it's not going to stick.
I call it a squishy.
I'm like, sure, why not? It doesn't mean that other people are going to call it a squishy. Like,
right.
you know, I've heard some other terms for the genre, but they didn't stick. Metroidvanias did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like roguelikes. Roguelikes, it's not as unwieldy as smashing two games together, but you know, Rogue is still a game and maybe not a franchise, but it is its own game.
I like
it's
the
a
genre roguelike because it's just like it's a game that's kind of like this other game. And then you get into like roguelite. It's a game that's kind of like a game that's kind of like Rogue.
And then the roguelike likes, we had that discussion a lot.
Oh God.
Yeah, I'm like, but believe me,
This rabbit
All right,
hole
I'll-
gets
I'll
deep.
stop dredging up war memories.
it happens on this program. We are talking about the past, after all.
Mhm.
Anyway, another design approach I noticed was actually solving the barriers, in the sense that a lot of them you do have to solve. Was there a particular reason you went for a more puzzle-based approach to progression?
I think it mostly just came about when I was thinking about the abilities that I had in mind to use, stuff like the current, like the tether and the jammer, etc., and just thinking about how they could be used. Instead of thinking about the obstacle first and then thinking about ways to solve it, I thought about like what can a player do with these tools? And I just started making things for them to do with it. Like, what can somebody do with the jammer? Granted, the question, what can somebody do with the jammer, is really weird because that ability is entirely circumstantial. Like, it does different things for everyone. Like, it does different things for every enemy, etc. So I was thinking about like, well, what kinds of different ways can I glitch something? I can, I could freeze it in place. I could make it do the opposite of itself, like those guys that spit out the blocks and you jam them and they start absorbing them. I had an enemy where you turn it solid. This is big eyeball guys. You turn them solid. Although I ended up moving them into places where that doesn't really matter anyway, but you can do it. And I wanted things that weren't kind of that like you get a red key, it opens the red door kind of thing. I wanted obstacles and abilities that took some creativity to use. And I like how it came out because when I'm watching somebody stream or play the game, sometimes they do stuff that I hadn't thought of, that I just happened to put these two different items in a room and somebody figured out that you could use them in a certain way that I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, once again, not a unique refrain. That's kind of how sequence breaking happened in the first place.
Yeah.
People got creative in ways the developers of games, like particularly Super Metroid, never planned.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, how much sequence breaking is built into this? And
I did not intentionally put any sequence breaks in. I put in my intended route and I didn't aside from patching out incredibly obvious ones that like a player could do by accident and then think it's the right way to do things. I didn't put any intentional ones in, and I didn't intentionally patch ones that I saw. And about 8 hours after the game came out, somebody streaming found the most phenomenal sequence break that basically skips an entire like section and like 3 entire abilities.
And you're like, hold on, wait a minute.
No, I was so excited. I was like, this is what I made this game for.
Yeah, that's actually pleasing to hear because honestly, I've never been too much of a fan of the intentional sequence break.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose.
That's pretty much where I stand on it as well. Like, it's not, you can't do this or anything. It's just, it's not really a sequence break if you plan it. But I suppose that's a philosophical discussion rather than a practical discussion.
Yeah.
What about speed running? Has anyone taken to speed running the game yet?
I know at least one person who's interested. I haven't seen too many people. I haven't seen any actual attempts, and I haven't seen too many people who are interested yet. I'm kind of hoping that picks up because I'm interested in seeing where it goes. I've also seen somebody do a low percent run. It wasn't a speed run. It took about 6 hours.
Right. It's often called a 0% run or a whatever percent run.
Yeah, it was 28% was what he ended up with, but he was just trying to go as low as possible.
And that's another thing that kind of gets tweaked until it can't get tweaked anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kit goes Super Metroid, and they find a way to go to 0.
Well, I'm talking more Metroid Fusion because the lowest that can be done is a 1% run. There is a missile pack that you have to pick up.
Yeah.
And nobody's been able to sequence break around that, and that's kind of the holy grail of that particular branch of speedrunning.
Yeah, because in some if you don't get it, the game actually soft locks.
I think so. Like, yeah, the point of order is, you can't skip it. And Metroid Fusion was also built against speedrunning. Right. So moving forward, now this game was built in Construct 2.
Yeah.
Like, how is that as a development platform? Because we don't hear about it that often on the program. Unity, sure. UE4, sure.
Yeah. So if you had asked me maybe 2 or 3 years ago, like when I was first working on Visual Out, I would have said it's phenomenal. I mean, it's an HTML5 engine, so you get some weird stuff when you try to develop for like Steam, and consoles are incredibly questionable. And it's 2D, so you're not going to get anything 3D out of it. So in that sense, it's pretty limiting. But for what I do, which is relatively small 2D games, and you can export to PC, Mac, and Linux. So for me, it works. The problem is they've since released Construct 3, and they're doing like bare minimum support on Construct 2 now, and I don't like Construct 3. So for me, I'm going to be looking to move probably to Unity, just because it seems like the next step up. I mean, it's what pretty much every indie uses, but
like, if it's not Unity, it's UE4.
Yeah.
Like I said,
I can't stand Blueprint though. I can't take it.
And Unity is also kind of a 3D thing, so isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so. It is. It started out as a 3D engine.
Yeah,
and then some crazy bastards made it 2D.
Well, it was because
both.
Yeah, because the demand was there.
It used to have pretty subpar 2D support, but it's gotten better as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm like, building a 2D thing in Unity is no big deal these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone's on Unity or moving to Unity. So, not surprising there. Though, what don't you like about Construct 3?
So for one, instead of being like an executable, like I can click a program on my computer and open it in its own friggin' program, it's browser based. The actual editor is opened in like Chrome. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
That's weird.
Yeah, like imagine using like Photoshop but in your browser. Like it's completely unwieldy.
I'm sure they'd love if they could get you to do that.
I'm like,
it's also subscription based, which
they definitely love that they can get people to do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like that's not that unusual in the days of, Photoshop and Office being subscription based. Like,
yeah, and I mean, I pay for a Photoshop subscription. It's like $10 a month, so I'm not. It's the same price as what Construct would be. I don't know. It's not. In my opinion, it is not a powerful enough program to pay the same thing as what I paid for Photoshop a month.
Yeah. Well, and you can use Unity for free.
Yeah.
I mean,
Unity's free version is phenomenal. It's the whole thing.
Right. It's just you have to put the powered by Unity thing on the front.
Yeah. It's a different discussion, but Unity has such a bad rap among developers, and it's so unfortunate.
I'm like,
yeah, we
not
talked
even
about
among developers, but among like critics.
Yeah, we talked about that once as a topic, and that a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of the most inexperienced games made in Unity have Unity front and center because they were made with the free version.
Yeah, and then any good games pay for the subscription so they can remove that splash screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, the asset flips. Though I'll note, it's not just, Unity's the biggest, but it's not the only program that has had asset flips. Hell, Construct has had asset flips.
Yeah, you can asset flip in any engine, really.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you get the YouTube critics who start bashing the platform because it provided these assets. It's like that's the tool sets, not the you got to blame the people who stole these things.
Mm-hmm.
But criticism doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the music, this was done by a group or a company called Abstraction.
Yeah, it's actually an individual, Ben Burns. On his Twitter is Ben Burns, and then his, I guess, company is Abstraction Music.
Right. So, did you give him direction on what you wanted out of the soundtrack, or was he like free to come up with his own?
So we kind of went back and forth. I think developing the initial feel of the soundtrack took maybe a month or two, because we went back and forth. I gave him a couple of references, some music from. We looked at some music from Fez. We looked at a couple of tracks from the 2064 Read Only Memories soundtrack. Some pieces from Dot Hack.
Nothing.
Okay. And I kind of told him what it was about specific pieces that I liked, what to ignore about them, like if there was anything, just like disregard that. That's not why I'm sending you this. Focus on this other thing. And we kind of went back and forth for a while. It took maybe a month to get the first track done, and then from there it was like once a week he was giving me a new track, which was a great way to work. It was very collaborative. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
How many tracks are there in the game totally?
Okay, so there's one for each sector. There's one for normal boss fights. There's one for the final boss fight. There's one for glitch space, title screen, and credits. So 9, I think.
And is there any place you can get the soundtrack independent of the game?
Yeah, it's like everywhere. It's on iTunes. It's on Bandcamp, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, I think. If you want, I can like send some links. Otherwise, it's either on his Twitter or my Twitter. You can also go to abstractionmusic.com, and then like he's got a couple links there.
Okay. And in terms of further Steam developments, any plans on achievements and/or trading cards?
So I have been attempting to get that to work. It works on Windows. It took like maybe 20 minutes tops to set up on Windows.
You got to be careful with that though, because they might ask what the name of your main character is if you put in a trading card of them.
I don't have plans for trading cards. I do have plans for achievements. If I can get that to work. Like I said, it works phenomenally on Windows. It took like maybe 20 minutes maximum to set up. Mac, I cannot get the Steam overlay to show up. It doesn't show up. It doesn't pop up if you get achievements. But supposedly the back end of that works. On Linux, however, you just get a black screen, and I don't know what's wrong.
Oh God.
It just you can't play. So if I can get that to work, that would be fantastic.
Like, I can only say good luck.
Yeah.
Linux.
Yeah, I think what I might do, honestly, is put it in the test branch, so like people could download it, but there's absolutely no guarantee that it's going to work. It's always frustrating because Linux is that like incredibly vocal minority where it's like 75% of your bug reports or like requests or whatever are going to be from Linux. It's like 3% of your player base.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, because of how Linux works, it's like, yeah, that sure is like completely different from every other computer running Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's funny though that like 3% of one's player base can take up like 75% of their bug reports.
Yeah. Now you mentioned consoles in brief. Like, how much of a technological challenge would it be to get visual on the PlayStation 4 or the Switch?
So as of right now, it is feasible, but maybe difficult. I'm not actually sure how difficult to get it on Xbox One. Switch and PlayStation 4, unfortunately, I would have to port to a different engine because Construct those two consoles don't support HTML5. Which is kind of frustrating because the Wii U supported HTML5.
Yeah, I was about to say, I thought the Wii U supported it. What the hell?
Yeah, but the Switch doesn't.
That's
So-
odd.
Yeah.
Well,
So unless Nintendo has a change of heart, or I have the means to port it to Unity or something, it doesn't look like a Switch version is going to happen.
yeah. I'm like, I think part of it is because Nintendo kind of got burned on HTML5, or rather, there were certain developers who burned them on that. Like, but that's just my speculation. Only Nintendo knows what Nintendo does.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose I'll ask my final question. Does Naka have any plans to Let's Play Visual Out?
I don't know. He did stream it, and he got probably to the halfway point.
Hmm.
I don't know if he's gonna go back and stream more of it though.
Guess that's up to him.
Yeah.
Any last questions from the crew here?
I don't think I have anything.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, it's a interesting game. I hope it does well, even though it doesn't stand out as well as we had hoped sometimes, you know?
Thanks.
Sorry, I feel bad because I said more negative things in my review than I wanted to.
No, it's I mean it's all fair, honestly.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what we said. Like, gotta be honest, or else it's not really a review.
Mhm.
Yeah. And like it did better than honestly I was expecting it to. The hope is that it does really well, but it has done better than I expected it to.
Well, that's certainly a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Like, well, actually, I do have one final question. What are your future plans?
Right now I'm thinking I might take kind of a break. I think I'm still gonna do smaller games, like at the scope of my previous game, Fragile Soft Machines, maybe. But I think just for stability's sake, I think I'm either gonna like take some contract work or at the very least step back from like full-time game development for the moment.
So no immediate expectation of visual in, visual out too.
It's audio in.
That makes sense.
That was I think Lenny came up with that.
Wouldn't surprise me.
No.
Yeah, I have no current plans for a sequel.
That could change.
But yeah, the ending of the game is open enough that I could.
Hmm.
But
All right then. So the game is Visual Out. It's available now on Steam and itch.io for $10. Be sure to pick it up today or tomorrow or whenever. Like, all right, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right, so welcome to this week's topic of discussion. So we're talking about evolving game systems. This was born out of a discussion last week about saving. And I think it was Mac who postulated the question, why aren't we allowed to save everywhere in every game ever these days?
I have an entire folder of games where I've basically broken their save files because I got trapped in like a death thing or whatever.
Of it is just what data is saved in a game. The more things a save file has to keep track of about like positions of various entities and.
Well, I'm more like where I accidentally saved when I was trapped inside of a wall or I'm trapped inside of a death animation. So I'm basically boned.
Mm-hmm.
That is the downside to saving everywhere. Like, I've had that happen to me. Like, oh God, I'm falling. Oh God, I'm still falling. Oh God, I'm never going to stop falling. I guess I'm going to, quit this shit.
This is my life now.
Yeah, like, I think we've all had that experience.
At least
In some
once.
fashion.
Like, remembering Hexen for the N64 was really prone to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, that was like the rare console game where you could save anywhere, just like the PC version. It's just doing a FPS with a analog stick is dicey business, especially a game that wasn't really designed for it.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't just about save files. This is about a lot of archaic systems that became archaic for reasons. I think a good one is Lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which are in a lot of franchises as, a legacy thing, even though the point of them has basically not existed for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Sense to follow the arcade, at least in the West.
Well,
Well, there are some games even post arcade that still had it as a point of to basically increase the amount of time you're playing the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
Or for games where you have a score thing, if your score resets when you have a game over, but not when you run out when you lose a life. But yeah.
Right, to showcase how pointless lives have become, even Mario has ditched it as of Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, Odyssey has no life system because
Sonic Forces has no life system, though Mania does.
Well, Mania's going for an old school.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah.
So you would have lives in a 16-bit game. Like it's a bit different if you're going retro or if you're intentionally invoking tropes of the past, so to speak. But if Super Mario Odyssey had lives, I definitely would have heard about it because I heard about it in the likes of Super Mario 3D World and the Galaxy games.
Yeah, in Mario games, lives have been pointless for a long time.
Yeah, especially lives have been really fucking pointless in all the 3D Mario games. 2D, it's another story, but even the 2D ones, they became pointless around the new Super Mario Brothers games, mainly because lives have always been kind of pointless since I'd say about Super Mario Brothers 3. When you could really rack up 99 lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just lives don't really play a part in modern difficulty systems. It's the de facto standard that seems to be arising is Dark Souls or Shovel Knight. Well,
yeah, instead of just you died, start over, it's or you can only die a certain number of times. It's like you died, so you now have a chance to recover whatever you lost there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, Super Mario Odyssey did the coin punishment. It's not much of a punishment.
Yeah, it's not many coins,
but it's still there.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, the punishment, in something like Super Mario Odyssey, is you have to repeat the sequence again, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or, in the case of Dark Souls, difficulty is part of the experience.
And the amount of the sequence that you have to repeat is sort of philosophically getting smaller too.
And I'll note,
usually when you die, you don't have to go back as far as you used to.
Yeah. And, branching into Dark Souls, I'll address the calls to implement a difficulty system. A variable difficulty system. Easy, medium, hard, nightmare, whatever. I'm kind of I'm really kind of torn on that. I get why people would want to have it, but here's the thing. Here's ultimately why I say no. The difficulty's the point, or at least it's a big part of what makes Dark Souls Dark Souls.
Yeah, although I can kind of get with I forget whether it was Extra Credits or someone else who said this. They had a thing where they basically recommended a thing where they're because there's some games that have this where I think it was in Celeste, where there's an easier mode, but it comes with a warning that says this is definitely not how the game was meant to be played.
Well, yeah. There have been other. There have been other. There have been ways to implement this. Actually, the Nintendo way, like Super Mario Galaxy 2 or Donkey Kong Country Returns, is if you fail a number of times in the level, they'll offer you a way to, like the white Donkey Kong,
Or
which
the like
will,
the golden, or like the Tanuki suit, the special one I forget, in
yeah,
Mario 3D World or
yeah,
Land,
it's like,
Land rather.
they will offer you a way to auto complete the level basically, so you can move on, so you don't get stuck. Other games will punish you. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm looking at you, Ninja Gaiden.
Even when
I'm
Ninja
like,
Gaiden lost the live system, it still beat the crap out of you and laughed doing it.
oh yeah. The easy mode is called Ninja Dog. Like it, and I think Devil May Cry 3 did this as well. It's like, oh sure, you can have an easy mode, but we'll insult the shit out of you for doing it.
Well, and also, it like with Ninja Gaiden, if you did the easy mode, you didn't get the true ending.
Right.
Yeah.
And another facet of this discussion is things like mini maps and glowing arrows and modern conveniences like keeping track of notes and I guess even like highlighting words, and how that shit is ruining gaming, or how it was so much better in the fucking 80s when you had to write that shit down.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's like, no, it wasn't.
No.
I played games from those eras. I'm like,
on one hand, having games constantly shouting at you about what to do next can be kind of unfun, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm like, shit like arrows. Yeah, having an option to turn those off would be nice. Like, you don't need the constant hand holding, but like shit like mini maps. I'll note we have that shit in real life now. We call them GPS devices. We have them on our phones.
Hell, even smartwatches have GPS watches or GPS navs on them now.
Yeah, so that kind of answers the question. If we had this shit in real life, yeah, we would totally fucking use it because it's fucking useful.
Yeah, and another thing about mini maps is that the complexity of environments in games is also generally increasing, which makes it harder to do that kind of thing with pen and paper.
Right, because what was used back in the 80s was graph paper. And the reason we used graph paper was because tile sets. Games were built off of tile sets.
Or at least square maps.
Yeah. It's like, you could map Metroid on the NES on graph paper. You could map a wizardry title on
map
graph
Ultima
paper.
on graph paper.
Yeah. You can't really do that with a Just Cause game, for an example.
Or like Breath of the Wild. That's a huge game.
Well, it's not just because it's a huge game. This is actually something I'm going to be talking about on Sunday, but a thing called topography exists now.
Right. It's also a very vertical game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait a sec. You mean I can go up now too? What?
Yeah. Like Ni no Kuni 2's map has actual fucking topography on its world map. It's like that's not a thing we had even in like the PlayStation 2 era.
Like they kind of had it, but it was more for aesthetics,
Yeah, it's like as opposed to like Ni no Kuni 2 here, where the topography actually affects like it's actual like mountain ranges and shit that you can see and it affects your movement.
Or like
not much.
The best example was from Final Fantasy XIV. When the 3.0 shift, you actually had floating islands that you could go to for treasure maps. And there were certain ones that like one was higher than the other, and like the higher one had the map or the lower one had the map location. Compared to 2.0, which was basically flat for all objective purposes.
Yeah. Teddy fan?
Hello?
Yeah.
Did my thing break?
No, I think
I can hear
Adam's
you.
thing might have broken.
Oh, yeah. My computer did a thing there for a bit.
Did you guys hear what I said?
Petty's fine. Are you okay, Adam?
Yeah, I'm fine. Like,
Okay.
there was kind of like a spike there.
It did the thing again.
Anyway, where were we?
We
Oh,
were
I
talking
was
about
Talking
topography.
about vertical space.
Yeah, vertical space is a thing that exists in games now, and games in general have gotten more complex,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of apply like this whole simple is best philosophy has been a thing that's been applied to video gaming in general. Like I've seen certain video game reviewers, complain about the modern state of gaming and how like the NES or the Atari Golden Age, or when games were simple, games were best. Those were real games, and I'm like, that may be true, but there's a reason why gaming has evolved the way it has. Like, and efforts to go back to simplicity really haven't taken. I mean, remember the Wii? Remember motion controls? Remember, how that was going to simplify gaming? And sure, it had its impact.
Mm-hmm.
When it worked. Big asterisk there.
Yeah, I mean, it delivered on its promise somewhat, but it didn't take, because as it turns out, motion controls had a limited viability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it got better with the Wii Motion Plus, but that was mostly for the first party stuff. Barely any third party used it well.
And shit like Space Invaders or Pong, look, it's not the 80s anymore. That kind of game development ethos, it has been regulated to the likes of mobile or downloadable stores.
Yeah, like, it's fine for a little bit, but you're not going to want to spend 20, 30 hours playing Space Invaders unless you grew up on it.
Yeah, and even then, well, Space Invaders wasn't, like, designed for long play sessions.
Yeah, that's true. Like,
yeah.
And, or games as art, or games expressing emotions or story or whatever. Like, guess what? These are signs that gaming is maturing, because I know, I'm a historian by trade, and I know, like, the history of film. Film used to be a lot simpler back in the times of before sound. Like
also before, remember the idea of cuts in film, and like special effects in film were like novel at one point, like really, because they didn't know that people would be able to understand what would happen if the camera's viewpoint suddenly changed.
Right, that shit that had to be invented in like the 20s, if I'm remembering correctly. But like back in the early days of film, just filming shit was novel enough to get a crowd.
Yeah, what we think is like quaint little like Instagram or like Twitter videos, that was like extraordinary stuff back in the early days of film.
Yeah, but then it became normal, it became standard, and it became not enough. So the genre had to invest in depth. You see this in pretty much everything. Like a book, books have been around for thousands of years, but television too. Like television used to be a lot simpler decades ago. So it does reason that video games get more complex, explore different things. it can be more than just like a score attack or adrenaline. I mean, shit, like the Nintendo, the NES was a leap forward in that regard. So, you know, nobody's saying that you can't have the old arcade experiences anymore.
There
It's
are
just
plenty of devs out there who are trying to build on the old arcade experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just those corners of the universe. That's the indie scene. That's the downloadable scene. That's the mobile scene.
Yeah,
even.
occasionally AAA will do a nostalgia trip, but it's more relegated to the indies.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if they do a nostalgia trip, it's going to be like a mini game in their game.
Yeah.
Like,
Or it's like
you
an anniversary thing.
yeah, like Activision isn't going to go back to making Pitfall in the style, like it was on the Atari 2600. That's
Yeah.
Things rarely evolve backwards,
Mm-hmm.
and
Unless it's
some
Mega Man, but that's when we're getting weird.
Well, Mega Man evolved backwards for like 9 and 10, but they seem to have mostly, like 11 seems like it's actually doing stuff. So
yeah, 11 seems to be saying fuck it, we're moving forward.
Bomberman R came out recently and is fairly faithful in a lot of ways to the original Bomberman games, but it doesn't have lives that are like noteworthy. Uh, it has multiplayer's always been a thing. It has lots more graphics and stuff and geometry than you could do in the original Bomberman games. So
Yeah, sometimes getting back to basics isn't a bad thing.
Especially if a series has been in a slump for a while, like Mega Man and
Yeah.
Bomberman.
Yeah, Resident Evil did that, and we got Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, hailed as one of the best
Mhm.
Resident Evil games ever.
Really, one of the best games ever. So there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with hell. Breath of the Wild was getting back to basics.
yeah, back to the feeling of Zelda 1, if not the actual play mechanics.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
it reinterpreted that in a modern setting instead of throwing out a HD 2D Zelda. I wouldn't have minded that, but like I don't think that would have had the same impact as Breath of the Wild did.
Change is not a bad thing, basically.
No, no, and it's also the modern age doesn't suck because things evolve, because old game systems got archaic. That's just the
Mhm.
nature of things. And if you want, like, they're not completely gone. Like, I mean, fuck, we've got like we've got so much 2D stuff now.
Mhm.
Let me tell you, like trying to play a 2D game in say the PlayStation 2 age.
Yeah, there was the PlayStation Sony was like strongly discouraging developers from doing 2D.
Yeah, like I mean, there were games that were doing the 2D thing, but they were rare.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
And they were even rarer in the US. There were some that were made in Japan, a lot of the RPGs and stuff that never got brought over, and part of the reason like officially is because they were 2D.
yeah, and
The N64 was like really bad at 2D for some reason or something.
Well,
That's an entire thing we could get into later.
yeah, like
Mhm.
it's just 3D was the wave of the future.
Yep.
And I'll note, and that kind of separates, the good systems from the bad systems because I'll note, 2D lied dormant for a while, for a good long while, but it came back. It came roaring back, and probably isn't disappearing like it did back in the day.
Yeah. Like, take Sonic, for example. There have been a lot of, fast platformers, but none that captured the momentum feel that Sonic had. That's why a lot of them, fell by the wayside. And then when Mania came out, people went insane because it had the platforming style that we've all grown to love.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, any final thoughts on this topic?
Evolution is usually good.
Hmm.
Yeah, change is not bad, and it's not bad to branch out either.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that sometimes like things change and then it takes a while to realize that not everything that changed had like the point of changing isn't to always have the new stuff be different from the old stuff. It's to add new stuff to the catalog of things that are possible.
Yeah, to build
But
upon.
remember that the old stuff is still valuable because that was like what we were just talking about with 3D. There were people that weren't into 2D for a while, but that doesn't mean that 2D wasn't still worth doing.
I mean, look, Symphony of the Night, it's an all-time classic, and that was 2D in the PlayStation age.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, it's things to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that'll about do it for this week's installment of Fragments of Silicon. The week ahead. So on Sunday, we have only the one review, and that is of Ni no Kuni 2, Reverend Kingdom. Probably going to be a long review because this is a
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how much spoilers you want to do.
Even without going into plot.
No, I know.
Well, it also depends how far we get. Jesus Christ. We may not get far enough to really talk about spoilers.
Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of gameplay because, wow.
Yeah, because, this game is doing a lot. And, it's also the reception of this game's been getting, which has been very, very divisive. And coming up next week, so we were supposed to have them on the program last week, but this upcoming Tuesday, illness pending, like not sure if they're going to be feeling better next week, but hopefully that's the case. We'll be having Fishing Cactus Games. Or if they don't, they'll have wrangled up a replacement.
A human sacrifice, if you will.
Yeah. Or, and Fishing Cactus, they are currently developing. I keep wanting to say Quantum Redshift because that was a game on the Xbox, but it's not. It's Shift Quantum. It's a 2D platform game done in the black and white style and really into angles, let's just say. Looks really interesting. Have more on that on Tuesday, hopefully. And coming up on Wednesday, April 11th, we'll be having Laurent Mercure of Chain Awesome Games. Yes, that is a real company. I'm like, it's the indie scene. You get names like this.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll be talking about a game called Aftercharge, which is a 3x3 versus thing. It looks pretty interesting. It just got announced for the Switch. It's also featuring asymmetrical gameplay, so that's always interesting. Once again, much more on this next week, and hopefully you'll be there. Rate, like, and subscribe. Until next time, I wish you good gaming.